Hey, Monica. So, trauma with a lowercase t. Well, I've definitely had my share of fear of needles and doctors and getting in trouble at the principal's office and dentists. I even fainted once when I had my blood drawn. But I don't necessarily think those are the fears that sort of have the longer standing ripple effect in my body as a sensory experience, even into adulthood so much. I think the stronger sense that I keep noticing is my fear of water. There was a time when I was like 6, and my best friend was Kelly Stevenson. Her dad was teaching me how to float on my back in the 4-foot area of the public pool, and he just held me up and said, make a bubble on your back. I still don't really know what that means. And then he let go and I went spinning and I couldn't tell which way was up, and it was really scary because I knew I needed to figure out which way was up in order to get back to oxygen, but I didn't know. I couldn't tell. My senses were all turned around and I was really confused, and I was in danger of breathing in water, and the whole thing was just not good. And so that triggered in me a strong sense that water is dangerous, and you don't get control in water the same way you do in other places. And then, of course, because I go to church, there was baptism by immersion when I was 8. And I remember spending months before then just dreading and wondering if there was some way I could get out of it. Maybe the apocalypse would come and save me from having to be immersed in water. I kind of fantasized about the end of the world so I didn't have to put my face in the water when I was 8. It didn't happen, and I went into the water, and I panicked so bad they had to do it twice because my foot kicked up, and it's not technically immersion if your foot's out of the water, but yeah. So when I was 11, I was in the wave pool at the local water park, and it was still, but then the waves started coming, and I didn't understand the physics of how waves work, and how when you're chest deep in still water and then the waves start coming, then the waves will go over your head. And before I knew it, the water was over my head, wave after wave, and my response time was not fast enough to get outside of the panic. And I didn't know what to do, except for I could barely get a breath in between each wave. And then I saw that I was just a little bit away from a ladder, and so I grabbed a hold of the ladder and I was clinging to it. The waves were coming back over my head and over my head and overhead, and I was just trying to time my breathing to be when the air hit. That was the only thing I had room in my head to focus on. And then I heard this voice, this 16-year-old kid working at the park, blowing his whistle at me, looking down with his sunshades, going, "Get off the ladder." And I called back to him, "I can't swim." And then he says, "Well, then climb up." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's a great idea." When your amygdala is in complete control of your body, you just don't always think of things like this. So I have spent, I spent the next decade just noticing that whenever I get into really deep water, my body would go numb. When I was 11 or 12, we would go to our local public pool, and I would get my goggles on and I would go right up to the edge of the deep end, and I'd look into it, and you could see the sun filtering down through the top and people's little legs just kicking away. And then the water would get darker and darker and darker, and there is just huge gap between their tiny little feet and the bottom of the pool, where it was just dark and murky and shadowy. And there's something just almost fatalistically, romantically creepy about it that both fascinated but scared the bejesus out of me at the same time. So I would always get this sense of, I don't know, just a little bit of thrill/dread whenever I was in deep water. And I still kind of do to this day, like going to an aquarium and looking at the depth at which the water goes and seeing the manatees or the otters go up and down and in and out, and they can just plummet right into the depths and they then pop back up into the sunshine. It's just, there's something really creepy about the bottom of deep water. In a rowboat, you look down and you can only see so far. And there's this sense that there's something down there, even though there's just as many things at the upper part as there is at the bottom. Just the fact that you can't see, and there's lack of control at the bottom of the water, and there's no oxygen down there, and it's so far away from the oxygen. It's almost like feeling like you're in outer space and you're 1,000 miles from everything. And of course, now that I'm older, I can understand the sensation. I can feel the sensation while still understanding that I'm safe and that I'm secure, that I know how to swim, that I'm in the boat, that things are fine, even though I'm still experiencing those sensations. And I think that's kind of a cool thing, to have this kind of dissonance between your understanding and the physiological reaction that's going on. So I'm watching my insides, and I'm, of course, because my insides are saying danger, eerie, creepy, scary, I'm also actually paying closer attention to the water, which in a way isn't necessarily to make it scary, but actually to make it more beautiful, which is weird. Isn't that weird? That this really old sense of fear can turn into just a more awareness of beauty and just something really magical about the whole experience, in a way that would have been lost on me if I wasn't so internally triggered by it. I'm wondering what you think about that, if you have any thoughts about beauty coming out of fear. Anyway, I'll talk to you next week.